One of the companies is what used to be SNC. People in this city have a very, very distinct memory of what SNC was a part of.
Well, that firm.
Are you kidding? The Liberals have been trying to convince Canadians that their high-speed rail project will transform the economy. But when Transport Minister Steve McKinnon was pressed on land use by CTV's Vashi Kapelos about affordability and rising costs, the House of Cards started to collapse. And to top it all off, when he was asked about gas tax relief considering the war in Iran, he admits that the Liberal government and Mark Carney haven't even talked about it. Let's take a look.
I wanted to start off on the prospect of this high-speed train going ahead. Is there any chance, based on what happens over the next number of years in this assessment, that your government says no to it, or is the mandate to make it work no matter what?
The mandate is to plan and execute on building this transformational infrastructure. We're currently in a planning period that lasts 4 years. If the Conservatives had their way, that planning process would have gone a lot longer, up to 8-10 years, or the Bloc Québécois for that matter. We want to build more quickly. We want to plan this project more quickly. Incredibly complex project, but we think we can have shovels in the ground within 4 years.
I understand the impetus for building things quickly. I think the concern, as I understand it, represented by both the Bloc and the Conservatives, but also existing in many areas along this, somewhat proposed route, is that in the name of speed, you will sacrifice sort of like a duty to consult them or a duty to defer to them in some way. They are afraid, to put it plainly, that their land will be expropriated. And that fear was heightened by what was passed in the Budget Implementation Act, which essentially allows you to, Alto, to go to you if they would like to expropriate that land and bypass measures that otherwise would have been in place. Why did you have to do that?
Well, again, we need to reduce this planning phase that we're in down to 4 years. But let me be very reassuring. First of all, Alto is a 60-meter wide corridor. It is a linear project, therefore it needs to go uninterrupted between the cities that you just mentioned. 60 meters is not a lot of land. We will obviously follow a lot of common sense, use public right-of-way when possible, electrical, utility corridors, highways where possible. And when not possible, we'll obviously apply common sense as well. We don't want to be dividing people's properties, farms, impeding access to rural roads or anything like that. So there will be all sorts of measures. The issue that we have now is we've identified a 10-kilometer wide corridor, and some politicians, Mr. Poilievre, like to pretend that that is the amount of land that Alto is going to require. That is not the case. It is a 60-meter wide corridor stretching from Quebec City to Toronto.
All right, folks. So it's a bit rich hearing Steve McKinnon talk about common sense when he's been part of the least common sense government that has been in power for the last now almost 11 years. So they're talking about this corridor. It's only 60 meters wide. 60 meters wide is actually quite significant if you think about it. So when you're talking about something like this, if you're just talking about a piece of land that has a, as a designated width, you can say, oh, well, that's not a big problem. Well, it becomes a problem when you have a continuous runway of this land going through different jurisdictions, because it's not just the 60 meters. There has to be buffer as well. And what happens with this? Well, when it comes to this 60-meter wide throughway that they need, you have to consider roads, and you have to consider overpasses, and you have to consider businesses that may be there that are no longer going to be there. You have to consider historical sites, which some of this is running through. And the bizarre thing I don't know what these people think is happening in these communities where this railway is coming through. Some of them think that the train's going to stop there. Like, there seems to be people in Peterborough, the older generation that are for this, they seem to think that the train is stopping there. They don't seem to understand that, no. There is no station in Peterborough. It's going straight through. That's the difference between high-speed rail and conventional rail. It's crazy. So you're having to essentially carve up the middle of some of these jurisdictions, and they get zero benefit. This is what Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are talking about. And they're saying this is going to be $90 billion. Give me a break. Rule number one about government projects is they're always over budget. I'm more expecting $150 to $200 billion on this, but let's just say it's $90 billion. That means every single Canadian from Vancouver Island all the way out to Cape Breton is paying for a railway they're not using. It's insanity. But let's focus in on the common sense aspect about this. Here's the route in question. So for those that don't know, this is the route that they're potentially looking at. Now, that purple area that's highlighted, that is the width of land where the route could possibly go. So it could go anywhere in those corridors. And now they're looking at a possible second route down to Kingston or through Kingston in terms of, where the direction of this may go. But you can see Peterborough, it's going straight through Peterborough. So I don't know what's going to happen there. And this is where they're looking at.
I understand why you're opposing what Mr. Poilievre has said, but it isn't just him, right? I read a lot today and found out that there are a lot of rural municipalities, for example, some councils that have even voted in opposition of this, because though you say that you're going to use common sense, that does not assure them that that will be the case, right? You have done in this Budget Implementation Act, you have kind of put in there this thing about this project that does allow, with less impediments, you to expropriate land.
Due process continues to exist, and impact assessments, environmental impact assessments,
They've been cut in half, though. It's only one agency, not the CTA
will
as
still
well.
be followed. Well, we are working at getting all projects, large and small in Canada, out of this cycle where it takes decades to get a project approved. Yes, we are doing that. But we're reducing this plan. And guess what? We are going to save billions of dollars by bringing forward the start of construction on this project. That is important. But, in terms of the Conservatives, they used to think big. Brian Mulroney used to think big. Heavens, John A. Macdonald, used to think in terms of building an intercontinental railroad. The Conservative Party itself, at their last convention, passed a resolution asking the government to build high-speed rail. Dean Del Mastro, the very riding Mr. Poilievre was in the other day, former MP for Peterborough, used to be a prime advocate for high-speed rail. And let's talk about Peterborough. That's a perfect example. A smaller city, which will find a new vocation. So in addition to all of the amazing things that currently happen in Peterborough, the access that it will give to the outside world, to Ottawa, to Toronto, to Montreal, for residents of Peterborough. So you can imagine going to Toronto to study. You can imagine working in Ottawa. These are possibilities that are absolutely transformational and that high-speed rail can offer.
I think you're right that there are challenging questions for the leader of the Conservatives about the party's position, and many of them were put to him at both press conferences he held this week by a number of reporters. But when you talk about imagining all the possibilities, right now it is just our imagination that we have, right? And I think there are also genuine questions from people who could be in the way of or part of where this route goes through about your government's ability and this Crown Corporation's ability to execute on what you have imagined. I looked at the consortium that has, the private sector consortium that will essentially be in charge of or tasked with implementing this and operating it.
Okay, I'm interrupting her question right there because not only is McKinnon floundering all over the place. Oh, well, it's going to be great for people from Peterborough. Well, that's all in imagination. There hasn't been a station designated for Peterborough as far as we've seen. Just saying. So, all of this fantasy land of, people in Peterborough can go and work in Ottawa, and people in Peterborough can go and work in Toronto. You're not discounting all of the little communities that this thing could drastically impact in a negative way on the way. And he talks about, well, Johnny MacDonald, the Intercontinental Railway. Yeah, Intercontinental Railway. At a time where most of that land wasn't in use. And they're not looking at a 60-meter wide corridor. This was a necessity to connect Western Canada to Central Canada to Eastern Canada. That transformed the economy. Are you trying to say that putting a high-speed rail from Toronto to Montreal, that's going to transform Canada's economy? Okay. I have an honest liberal minister I'd like you to meet, if you believe that. Anyhow, I want to interrupt Vashi here because she's talking about the consortium. The consortium is a group of organizations that are essentially partnering with the government to build this. And before she gets to that, I want to talk about a few scandals. Atkins Realis. Remember Atkins Realis? So Atkins Realis used to be SNC-Lavalin. So a global engineering and construction firm based in Montreal, Quebec, works with several industries including oil, gas, mining, cybersecurity, nuclear power, builds public and private infrastructure around the world. Began in 1911, used to be called SNC, merged with their competitor Lavalin. Since 2011, allegations of fraud, corruption on the part of SNC-Lavalin and several of its executives have plagued the company with scandal. This isn't me saying it. This isn't the Conservative saying it. This is on the Canadian Encyclopedia website, folks. This is a matter of Canadian Encyclopedia record. Okay? In 2023, SNC-Lavalin changed its name and rebranded to Atkins Realis. Gee, I wonder why they did that. Back in 2012, SNC-Lavalin CEO resigns as mystery payments are probed. On February 19, 2015, SNC-Lavalin was charged with offenses contrary to paragraph 31B of the Corruption of Foreign Public Officials Act and subsection 381 of the Criminal Code for actions that are alleged to have taken place between 2001 and 2011. Not good. According to publicly available information, in May 2015, the chief executive officer of SNC-Lavalin stated that he had made efforts to seek a settlement with previous government in order to avoid a lengthy criminal trial. This is from Global Affairs Canada, Canada's fight against foreign bribery. Sami Babawi, Constantine Kiras, and Stéphane Roy. On January 31st, 2014, charges were laid against two former SNC-Lavalin executives, Sami Babawi and Stéphane Roy, with respect to allegations of bribes to foreign public officials in Libya. Sami Babawi was charged with 1 count of fraud over $5,000, 2 counts of possession of proceeds of crime, 4 counts of possession of stolen property, and 1 count of bribery of a foreign public official pursuant to subsection 3.1 of the CFPOA. Sami Babawi was subsequently charged on September 9th, 2014 with 1 count of obstructing justice. Constantine Kiras, the lawyer for Sami Babawi, was also charged on September 9th, 2014 with 1 count of obstructing justice and 1 count of extortion. Stéphane Roy was charged with 1 count of fraud over $5,000 and 1 count of bribery of a foreign public official pursuant to subsection 3.1 of the CFPOA. Ex-SNC-Lavalin exec Sami Babawi gets 8.5 years for fraud and corruption. Now, why are we talking about Atkins Realis? Well, this was announced last year. Atkins Realis Group, a world-class engineering services and nuclear company with offices around the world, has been chosen by the Government of Canada as part of the Cadence Consortium, CDPQ, Infra, Qollis, Sistra, SNCF, Voyageur, and Air Canada, as the preferred private development partner for the high-speed rail project between Toronto and Quebec City. Cadence has signed an agreement with Alto, a Crown corporation that sets out the terms of the next phase of the project, its co-development. This phase represents an investment of $3.9 billion over 6 years from the Government of Canada. This is the company that the government of Canada has said, you know what? We were just embroiled in one of Canada's biggest political scandals with these folks. Let's bring that all up again. Let's bring these people in. Are you kidding?
One of the companies is what used to be SNC. People in this city have a very, very distinct memory of what SNC was a part of, another consortium that delivered an LRT that was well beyond the promised cost and encountered many, many delays. Why should we believe this time will be different?
Well, that firm is in a consortium with people like SNCF, the French TGV builder, who have been successful. I visited their facilities at the Gare de Lyon in Paris. It's been an incredible accomplishment to see high-speed rail through France. And remember that France, we go through a lot of farmland. They go through a lot of densely populated areas. They go through a lot of rich heritage sites. And this is something that we are able to execute in Canada. We used to, growing up, this was a dream, high-speed rail. What we're saying to Canadians now is it can be real. We can give this gift to our children. If we had started 30 years ago, we'd have it now. And it's something that Canadians probably should have demanded of their governments 30 years ago. The old proverb says, what's the best time to plant a tree? It was 20 years ago. The next best time is tomorrow. And we're very much taking that approach here in building this major piece of infrastructure that will be absolutely transformational for our economy. It is complex, there's no doubt about that. And we will have to be listening very, very carefully to all of the people you mentioned, to reeves, to mayors, to agriculture groups. We will be doing that.
You're going to make sure this thing happens no matter what. And that sense is buoyed by the fact that you essentially snuck this section into an omnibus bill that was supposed to be about budget implementation.
Well, I don't know how it could be that I snuck it in. I made 2 committee appearances. We spent an entire day in the House of Commons debating it.
It's an omnibus bill, something you used to criticize. We've talked about that before.
I don't think snuck was the right verb there.
No, but if this were something standalone that could be debated by the MPs who represent constituents who are concerned about what this prospect, the prospect of this project means in real terms, that would be a substantive debate. Putting it in a bill that, if it was defeated, would defeat your government does not equate to a substantive debate.
Look, this is a project that it covers 40% of Canada's population. And by the way, that does not mean we stop there. I think high-speed rail is a technology that we have to contemplate for other regions of Canada as well. But we have to get this project, do it right, consult, listen, be very, very sensitive. We need to explain the benefits. They are considerable for our environment. They are considerable for our economy. Think of the trade union men and women who will build this, 51,000 people strong. Think of the Canadian steel and lumber and aluminum that will go into building this project. This is a true transformational, generational investment that we're making for Canada. And we like to say that we're going to build Canada strong. This is an essential part of doing just that.
Will it be affordable for people who are using it? Because that consortium will also operate it, meaning there will not be competition on which company ends up operating which routes, that kind of thing. That to me does not sound like a recipe for a cheap ticket price.
This is the problem when a government essentially hands out a monopoly. These are the questions that should be brought up when talking about something like this. It's not just the project itself in terms of, the people it's going to displace, which is also significant. That's one half of the reason why you should probably be talking about this in Parliament and that MPs should probably be voting on it. The other half of this is how much it's going to cost not just taxpayers today, but generations from now. Steve McKinnon brings up this proverb, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When the best time not to actually saddle tomorrow's generation with $100 billion in debt? Yeah, that's right now. Especially we're in the middle of an affordability crisis. They're trying to pitch this as, if I had to equate it, this is the equivalent of the NDP's dental plan.
Free dental care.
Free dental care.
Free dental care.
Free dental care. Free dental care.
Free dental care.
Close to 100,000 seniors have gotten free dental care.
This is not free dental care.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, David. It's not a free program.
That's what basically this is. And they're trying to say that this is going to solve all the problems of Canada. Oh, and by the way, it's not just this. Yeah, just wait. We're going to get to the rest of the country. Do we need high-speed rail in this country? Sure, I would argue that we do. I'm sure many Canadians would argue that we do. However, what problem are you trying to solve? This is the question. And they haven't articulated that problem. Just, high-speed rail would be great from Ottawa to Peterborough to Toronto. I don't really see that solving a problem that needs solving right now. The big projects that we need, many of them are in Alberta. And the rest of them involve our ports. You need pipelines. You need infrastructure. The Ring of Fire. You need to put projects into these places where we're actually going to be generating new wealth in this country. And then maybe you can look at, all right, now that we have a little bit more money and a little bit more bankroll into the government as a result of all of these amazing projects around the country, now we can talk about if we can afford the nice, shiny, high-speed rail. This is basically Springfield and the monorail going to solve all of your problems. Well, guess what, Liberals? You don't even have to, have a history lesson. Just go watch that episode of The Simpsons and see what happens.
Well, first of all, we will be maintaining via rail service,
which is not cheap either.
We need to be very reassuring to folks about that. People who rely on via rail service will continue to enjoy via rail service, and the operating model of high-speed rail will be put out to tender. It will go to the lowest bidder. So there's no final arrangement yet on an operating model for a high-speed rail.
Final question on a larger issue around affordability. The Conservatives are asking your government to consider taking off the federal portion of the gas tax until 2027 to augment the increased price at the pump that Canadians are really feeling in a punctuated way right now. Are you considering that?
Well, we are obviously very sensitive to the high price of energy caused by this war in Iran. And these are entirely external factors, nothing to do with the fundamentals of Canada. As you know, Canada is a major petroleum and gas exporter. We're going to make sure that we do our part to continue to make shortages elsewhere in the world less of a factor. So obviously this is something we're watching on a daily basis. We see a lot of price fluctuations. As we get more clarity, we'll be able to continue to assess the situation.
So just respectfully, I wasn't blaming you or your government for this. I know that this is because of what's happening in Iran, but there's not a lot of fluctuation right now. It's all fluctuation around a much higher price at the pump. The question is whether you would consider relieving the federal portion of the gas tax at any point to offer some relief to Canadians.
It's an interesting idea that I heard from Mr. Poilievre, but I haven't been part of any discussion about removing the gas tax. No.
It's an interesting idea that I heard from Mr. Poilievre. Contrast this to the other way that they were framing this on the Conservatives over the last, 3 years now? Remember Mark Holland?
Good news, kids. You can take a summer fun time vacation where you're locked in a car for 10 consecutive days, nonstop with no bathroom breaks, and the Conservatives have a plan for you to have that summertime fun. And the cost? Give up the future of the planet, right? Don't worry, kids, about climate change. Don't worry about taking action on the planet. Enjoy your 10 hours in the car and let the planet burn.
This is what you want Canadians to absorb here, Mr. McKinnon. And the fact that you admit that The Liberals have not even discussed it. It's not surprising to us. Not surprising in the least, but it is concerning. And it should concern all of the Liberal voters out there. And this shows you which party is actually concerned about giving Canadians actual relief when it comes to affordability, and the ones that are, pardon the pun, gaslighting you about it.